Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to go through how pivot points work in MASH because they work slightly differently to how you might expect, given that you don't just hit insert on a pivot point, move it and then carry on as normal. That's not how pivot points work in MASH. They actually ignore the pivot points that you set in Maya, and there are various technical reasons for this, sadly, so it just means that you have to work in a different way. So you can use pivot points, you can have pivot points, or have objects behave like they have pivot points. You just need to kind of fake it. And there are a couple of ways to do this. There's a quick and dirty way, and then there's just a better way, and I definitely recommend using the second option, but I'll show you both. So let's get going. I'm just going to create a cube and then go and make a new MASH network. Then over on the distribute node, I'm just going to scale everything up in Y, and then I'm going to rotate everything around the X-axis. Then if I zoom in here, you'll see that when I scale these objects, they are scaling in from their center, and they are rotating around their center, and that is something that you might not want. You might want them to scale from the bottom or from the top side, whatever, and that's entirely possible. You just need to, like I said, fake a pivot. So let's do that. So we'll just unhide our original cube. I'm just going to press Ctrl 1 to go isolate select. Now see that its pivot point is in the center. If I hit insert, there it is. We can't do anything with this though. We move this, it's just going to be ignored by MASH, so no point in doing that. So like I said, two ways to do this. First of all, it's worth mentioning that the pivot point that MASH uses is the world center when all of the transform attributes are 0. So the position translate attributes are 0, sorry. So when you zero out the translate, so 0x, 0y, 0z, like this, wherever the world center is, that's the pivot point on the object. So as you may have already guessed, the quick and dirty way to change a pivot point is to say, if we were to move the object up here, so if I was to move the object up half its height, so the bottom of the object is sitting on the world center, and then I was to free transformations, let's just make sure that, yep, that's all right. So if I free transformations there, now with the translate at 0, the world center is the pivot point. So now the world center is at the bottom of the object. So if I go back into, so if I hide this and then turn off isolate select, you'll see that the objects are now scaling and rotating from the center of the bottom. So where the world center is. So yeah, okay. So that's how you do it the quick and dirty way. Like I say, don't recommend that personally, but you can work like that if you want to. It's just because your object may be made up of the thing going into MASH may be made up of several different objects. So let's break this. I'm just going to put that back to where it was, and then I'm going to free transformations again. So now we're back to where we started. So the way that I would do this is to select the cube and then group it, and we'll call this group. Call that cube pivot, and then what we can do is we can move the cube up inside the group here, and so we don't have to freeze our transforms, our translate attributes on the cube. We can leave these as they are, but then what you have to do is, instead of adding the cube to the MASH network, you add the pivots to the MASH network. So if we go over to the repro node here, what we can do is we can middle mouse drag cube pivot over pcube1. What that will do is it will swap the objects. So now cube pivot is in the MASH network. So we can hide that, and then I can turn off isolate select, and we have exactly the same effect. So if I scale those objects and then rotate them, you see that we're scaling, rotating from the bottom. So that is a crash course in how to work with pivot points in MASH. Hope you find that useful.